Talks Remembered. The following account deals mainly with some episodes from the last 2 years of the life of Dr. Francis Rolls. But first, by way of a short introduction, Dr. Rolls was a follower of the Russian writer P.D. Ouspensky. Before he died, Ouspensky told Dr. Rolls to find the method that was missing from the system he had been teaching. But if he found the method, he would also find the source of the system and a man of a very high level of being to guide them after his death. All of that turned out just as Ouspensky had said. I was taught the method, which we now know as meditation, by Dr. Rolls early in 1971, and attended his meetings for the next 11 years. During that time, I formed a relationship with him when helping with the initiations and on our unofficial races home after the movements on Monday evenings, the idea being to see how far I could get on my bicycle before he overtook me, and also some chances for longer conversations with him when he gave me lifts to and from Collet in his car. But this account starts early in 1981. Mrs. Rolls has had a serious heart attack, and I am asked by Wyn Mellett to help cook some of their meals. I arrived at Waterton for the first time on January the 31st, 1981. It was also Ian Haxton's first visit. He was later to become Dr. Rolls's companion. We were shown into the large entrance hall by George Mellett. Soon Dr. Rolls came down in his dressing gown. After some initial talk, he said to me, "You're doing very well. Don't do, Ian. You've fallen down, but we'll soon have you back up again." Then before going away to change, he said to me, "Tell him about the system." Then he thought for a while, realizing how much older Ian was than me, and said, "No, you tell him about it." I cooked Dr. and Mrs. Rolls and Ian a risotto. Mrs. Rolls couldn't eat rice, so I made her some of her favourite leek and potato soup. I took it up to her room. I have never seen an elderly lady look so beautiful, and I felt quite in love with her for the rest of the day. I asked her how she was, but before she could answer, Dr. Rolls said, "You've got a good bedside manner like your brother." Later downstairs during lunch, Dr. Rolls said, "My wife was pleased to see one of her front row at the movements, taking orders." Ian started to clear away the dinner things at the end of the meal. Dr. Rolls said, "He's trying to look busy." On Saturday, February the 7th, I cooked Dr. and Mrs. Rolls her cauliflower cheese, which was one of Mrs. Rolls's favourite dishes. She was in bed when I took her food up, and she looked much more tired. Whenever we tried to talk, Dr. Rolls grabbed the television remote control and turned it to full volume, saying, "Quick, it's for skiing," whereupon Mrs. Rolls grabbed it back and turned it down. So Dr. Rolls promptly grabbed it back and turned it up to full volume, though later he gave me an enormous pat on the back because Mrs. Rolls had actually eaten some of the cauliflower cheese at a time when she was eating so little. During lunch I asked Dr. Rolls about the future of the movements. Would they go beyond Collet? He replied, "No, they won't, as there is no one capable of teaching both the music and the dancing, and it would be better that they came to an end, rather than be taught imperfectly." I said, "Helen Wright said that in the film Meetings with Remarkable Men, they were doing mental exercises during the big prayer," to which he replied, "Oh, she noticed that, did she? I knew Gurdjieff's successor, Madame de Solzman, very well, and I admired her very much. But then she handed over to a man who's based the whole thing on mental exercises, which only leads to more duality. I told Dr. Rolls that we had live music at the turning the night before. He was very pleased. It makes all the difference. Young Stuart doesn't like playing with anyone else. He asked if I thought the children were tired after turning. I said they had plenty of energy for playing games afterwards, as at that time I had to play ghosts with them up and down the spiral staircase after every macabre. He said, "Oh, that's good." On Saturday the 14th of February, I cooked Dr. and Mrs. Rolls a cheese casserole. They were both downstairs in the dining room for lunch for the first time. Mrs. Rolls looked quite frail. During lunch, she said that she had heard about my floral designs from Helen Wright, and asked about Hardy Amis and how I came to know him. I told them that Judy Britton had introduced me to him. They were both very impressed with Judy's book and her modesty over it. During the conversation, I told Dr. Rolls how when he had initiated me, he had said the meditation would help me with my A-levels. I said, "You were quite right. It did help, as I wasn't the least bit upset when I failed them." Dr. Rolls told me how their cat brought in a baby kingfisher and how they looked after it until it flew away. A year and a half later, while sorting through his paintings, I came across a small scrap of paper with a watercolour of a young kingfisher on it. On the bank holiday Monday, May the 25th, I cooked them a cauliflower cheese. They were both upstairs. I took dinner up on a tray and talked to both of them. Mrs. Rolls thanked me for the Campion photo I had sent her. Dr. Rolls handed me his half-empty glass of sherry to finish. Afterwards, downstairs, I felt incredibly happy, and I was sure that I had seen Mrs. Rolls for the last time. Ian told me that as I was coming, she had insisted on doing her hair. "It takes her half an hour to get to the bathroom," he said. Early in July, I missed the large Monday meeting as I was staying with Hardy Amis in order to draw his old roses at his Cotswold home. I phoned a friend to hear about the meeting. She told me that Mrs. Rolls had died, yet Dr. Rolls was radiant on the platform. I then went for a long walk across the fields to remember her alone. During August 1981, Ian went away on holiday up to Northumberland, so Helen Wright asked me to stay with Dr. Rolls to cook his meals and generally look after him. She said it would be an opportunity to get to know him better. I arrived on Monday the 17th of August. Wynne was cooking the lunch, so I set up my easel in the library by the doors that opened onto the garden that led down to the River Thames. I then established myself in Ian's room. I took Dr. Rolls his morning coffee at 11 o'clock to his upstairs room. Then I set to work on design. George, Wynne, Dr. Rolls and I had lunch together. Then George and Wynne left, and Dr. Rolls went to sleep in the sitting room. When he woke up, he watched the cricket and came in to see my design and tell me the score. At 4:30, I took him his tea, after which he went out to meditate in the garden under his umbrella. Before supper at 7:30 we had a sherry together, and he told me about Mrs. Rolls's last days, how successive layers of personality died, and she wanted to tell of her discoveries. "Why did you call me back? It was so beautiful where I was," and "tell them everything's all right at the end." We had soup and sandwiches for supper, and talked about Hardy Amis and Japanese art. Dr. Rolls thought the prints were the best art to have come out of Japan, and that Hokusai must have had quite a sense of humour. We then had a talk about how to remember in recurrence. The outcome of it was that we felt one's skill must become second nature and enter essence. While we were talking in the dining room, the telephone rang in the hall. During the day, when it rang, Dr. Rolls rushed to it, but this time he ignored it, so I went. It was my old agent, Barry, having got my telephone number from home. When I went back into the dining room, Dr. Rolls said, "How do you sell your designs? Do you have an agent?" His hearing, incidentally, was very poor, even when close to him, and he usually wouldn't hear unless one spoke directly to him. I told him about how I had been playing cribbage in a pub in Suffolk. He said we must get some beer in. He then showed me an album of photographs of Mrs. Rolls that someone had given him to fill up. I looked through the album, and he would explain the different photos. He said that while at Waterton, in addition to 2 half-hours of meditation a day, I should read for half an hour from Shankaracharya's 1972 record. At 10 o'clock he retired to bed. I took up the milk for his morning cereal and helped him remove his special stockings. On Tuesday the 18th, Dr. Rolls rang his buzzer at 7 a.m. I went down to the kitchen and made some toast, which I took him, as this was his normal morning routine. Mooney Chapara came to prepare lunch at 9 and gave Dr. Rolls his coffee. I designed in the library during the morning, the sun streaming in the open French windows. The phone rang. Dr. Rolls didn't answer it, so I did. It was Jaiswal, the interpreter Dr. Rolls had to use with the Shankaracharya, and a member of the SES. He wanted to know if he could come and see Dr. Rolls today. When I told Dr. Rolls, he said, "Oh dear, how can I put him off? I know, I won't phone back. He keeps telling me off SES style." During the afternoon, Dr. Rolls slept and sat in the garden and came to see my design. Peter Reed came to mow the lawn, while Dr. Rolls watched a wildlife program. He then meditated in the garden. I cooked supper, and we watched a program on sculpture, then one about Al Capone and the Chicago gangsters. "I don't think this is doing us much good," said Dr. Rolls. At 9:45 he rang Lady Allen, and then settled down with a 1962 volume to read. I fetched my 1972 volume and sat down with him. We read until 10:45, during which time I felt increasingly happy and full of energy as I read more and more lovely things. And though Dr. Rolls was reading his own book, he commented on the stories I had just read. Then he went up to bed, and I took up his milk. On Wednesday the 19th, I took Dr. Rolls his toast at 7 a.m. and started work on a new design. I took Dr. Rolls his coffee at 11 and made his bed. Pat Graysbrook came and prepared lunch. After lunch, Dr. Rolls rested, and I carried on designing. He then watched the cricket, and Bar Fleming came to tea. He talked about Jamie Harp, how personality dies first, then essence, till just the Atman is left, just a being of light. I found a book in Ian's room called Last Remembrances of a Magician. It was quite a long book by Rodney Collin about Ouspensky's last days, and although it included many examples of the miraculous, I didn't like the flavour of the book generally, and I was glad to hear from Ian later that Dr. Rolls loathed it. I cooked a scrambled egg for supper, then tinned peaches and coffee. Dr. Rolls said, "Ah, what more could a man wish for?" We then watched the Dick Emery show, the news, and the Bowls Championship, after which we both read from the Shankaracharya records till 11:30. Dr. Rolls sometimes asked me what bit I was reading, or what did I think of such and such. When we went up to bed, I took him his milk. He said he was going to sit up and watch the cricket. On Thursday the 20th, I took Dr. Earls his toast at 8 a.m. when he rang his buzzer. Sarah Beckwith came to cook lunch. They didn't stay to eat it. I designed and read Last Remembrances during the afternoon. I gave Dr. Earls his tea at 4:30 p.m. and we had supper at 8 o'clock and talked on a lot of various subjects. I read the story of the seabird on the mast of a ship. He asked what it meant to me. I said, personality keeps taking one off in different directions, which clearly are not meant to be and don't work. Eventually one returns to the course that Paramatman has set for one. Dr. Earls said, yes, we have to keep having these little excursions, east, west, north, south. I said, also it could apply to the meditation, trusting the rhythm of a mantra and where it takes one, instead of trying to do it all oneself. He said, yes, that's what we did with my wife to change her breathing. He talked about the story of Lakshman's dive and how time in the subtle world is different in relation to Maya and passing time. He related this to the diagram of before, now, after in the book A New Model of the Universe. He said that he felt we had not got the law of octaves quite right. There's room for alteration. Some musicians, such as Helen Wright, think it's not quite right at the C-Do interval, though we must check before making it public. He talked about time in relation to different types of art, how it's usually of short duration in relation to show business, but some arts can go on having an effect for years. What causes this? It's the same with music, such as Mozart. He did not think anything of great importance was happening in art or music at the moment that he knew of. We talked about energy. I related the case of a cross-country run 3 days after I learnt to meditate, when I ran in front of a games master. Instead of my usual place at the back, he was heard to say, I can't think what's come over Jacobs. Dr. Earls liked the story. Do you still get it? Sometimes, I answered. Yes, it's difficult to keep it up, he replied. I then taught Dr. Earls how to play cribbage, as I had previously brought in several cans of beer. He liked it very much, but couldn't work out the scoring, so just held up his hand of cards for me to tell him what to put down. He was very amused by the phrase in the game, one for his knob, when you turn up a jack. And whenever he put down his cards, he would say, and one for his knob. Afterwards, he said, we must play some more when I get back from caretaking on Saturday. We then talked about sport. He played mainly hockey and table tennis, but didn't like rowing. We both liked judo. When he went up to his bedroom to read, I took him his milk. He asked what I would do while caretaking. I said I would play my recorder in the top studio. You should teach Roy to play cribbage. It might help him relax, he answered. On Friday the 21st, George and Wynne came over at 10:30. Wynne prepared lunch, which she left. Dr. Earls and I had lunch. Then he watched television and slept. At 4:30 p.m., I made his tea and prepared supper for him in my absence. I was going to Collet to check 2 elderly men who had belonged to Maurice Nichols' groups, but left when it split up after his death and came under the influence of Gurdjieff's groups. Before I left, Dr. Earls said, you're going to see 2 rather sophisticated men. I can't remember their names, but tell them that you can pass any questions on to me. I cycled from Waterton to Collet on the hot August evening, and when I arrived I felt quite tired. I thought, I can't give them anything like this. Please, Paramat Man, fill me with energy, if only for the duration of a check. The thought came to me then that my thoughts, and even worrying about the tiredness, was a block for this energy, and the only answer was to meditate and make the way open. I meditated in the blue room and soon started to feel full of sattva and love. It felt like I was a vessel for it for that occasion. Both the men were very strange, one very lacking in energy, and the other in and out of mental homes. Afterwards I cycled back to Waterton, still with this extraordinary energy. Dr. Rolls was watching television. We had supper quietly. I then told him all about my checks. Yet although he pretended he couldn't even remember the names of the two men, he gave me a virtual life history of both of them. About the man with no energy, he said the SES did that for him. He later showed me a letter from Nolan Howett on the effect the SES had on people, and how Merle Swan is reviving them in Australia, including Mr. McLaren claiming that he has been charged by the Shankaracharya to start a new renaissance and a new religion. He then talked about the quiet hemisphere reflecting the opposite of what the other wanted, as in dreams at night. Like the complementary colour, when you look at a light and then close your eyes, I think there must be a law in it. He then asked if I wanted to go to bed or read. I said, but I didn't want to go to bed because I felt so full of energy. So we read for a while, and then showed each other the pieces we had read. Then he went to bed. On Saturday the 22nd, Mooney prepared lunch, which she left for us. During the afternoon, I made out colour charts to accompany my designs. At 4:30, I took Dr. Rolls his tea, and then carried on with my work and meditated. I cooked his supper at 7:30. After supper, he tried to provoke me by making a statement about my private life, which I won't relate here, save that I didn't turn negative in any way. This seemed to open the way for a very long and extraordinary conversation, which went on for several hours, during which he explained how he wanted the work to continue. He also went over some of the unclear episodes in the work's past. I can only remember small parts of this conversation. The atmosphere during the conversation I can only describe as one of magic, and it felt somehow that the room we were in was all that existed, and that outside was just space and planets and stars. It didn't really matter. I want Colet to be a cell of self-knowledge, no longer the image of an esoteric school. All we are doing is aim for the year 2000. Who should my successor be? Tell me all the people who are respected at Colet. I said Michael Fleming, Alan Cager-Smith, Toby de la Binière, Sean and Paddy Crampton, Richard Guyot. I don't know enough about Dr. Fenwick. Dr. Rolls said, Dr. Fenwick is very involved with his work outside. Professor Guyot isn't a good enough meditator. Also, he's a public figure, being rector of the Royal College of Art, though that will soon change, of course. Michael Fleming is a very modest man, and his wife would support him. Toby de la Binière is also a very modest man whose wife would support him. Mr. Rezoui said that he is the best Turner. It's said that the teacher's main study becomes the school main area of study. Do you think Alan Cager-Smith would make us all pot? I said if it was Michael Fleming or Toby de la Binière, finance would be the main area of study, though Michael Fleming is also very keen on music. Dr. Rolls laughed and said, my main area of study has been psychology. I think they would see the need for it. I feel we need some basic course and system psychology for those who want it, like the SES have? I said yes, something on the lines of the psychological lectures, but updated. He said yes, that is what we need, but what about the actual language of the system? Is it satisfactory, this mixture of Eastern and Western? It will probably have to be resolved at some time. I said, what about the language of Christianity? He said that's difficult because of all the different sects. I said, Maurice Nichols' book, The Mark, seems to serve the function of joining the system and Christianity. He answered, yes, it does. Well, I'm glad the committee are respected. When I die, they will take over the running of Colet until someone emerges to be the leader. Lord Allen wouldn't have been suitable as the leader, as he wasn't keen enough on the knowledge side, and he would have come up against difficulties later on. He used to say to me, why the need for all this knowledge? At such times as these, a Messiah usually appears, but what sort of Messiah do we need? Perhaps an educationalist. I said Messiahs aren't usually recognized until long after their death. He said, yes, that's true. Charles and Di seem a nice couple. Mr. Uspensky told me to look for a method that involved repeating one word, but not a devotional Indian school. The Maharishi and I parted on good terms. I went to visit him at his apartment, which was full of very hostile ex-Colet people, so he sent them all out of the room and had a very nice talk. The Maharishi sent out a circular letter saying that I was given to meditation and should not be. Later, Jaiswal was in India and heard the Shankaracharya telling off the Maharishi for this. I taught the system to Maclaren, but he went off and based it on In Search of the Miraculous. I don't know why the Shankaracharya doesn't see through him. Perhaps he does, but like Mrs. Cardew, he doesn't condemn. Maclaren is a charlatan. How will you know what to do in the year 2000? I answered, become quiet and get guidance from within, so we know what's right then. Dr. Rolls said, yes, that's right, but we've got a lot to get through before then. What will happen in Europe with communism, etc.? Do you think Russia will get better when Brezhnev goes? Before I die, I want to leave a body of writing that can be referred to. What sort of thing do you think I should leave? I said, I think something in the form of parables or diagrams, so that it doesn't state the doctrine, like In Search of the Miraculous, and so can't become out of date. Dr. Rolls continued, yes. What I want to do is something like a Mathnavi, but using the Shankaracharya stories. Maureen is coming to discuss it on Tuesday. All the present troubles in the world are just a friction that's required to usher in the new paradigm. I asked, does the meditation have a big future, or is it just our particular method as a society? He answered, no, it's intended for everybody. I said, I think when you die, several people will go off and start up their own groups on their own. He replied, that will be a good thing if they do. He continued, we had a connection with Prince Philip, and it was suggested that he learnt to meditate, but he said he wouldn't be able to because of his position. I asked him if he wanted music for the work-in tomorrow. He said he did, but had nothing to play it on. I produced a tape recorder I had borrowed and fitted it into his record player. It worked a treat, and we listened to the hymn Canticle to the Sun, recorded at Mrs. Rolls's memorial service. Isn't it amazing how things work out, he said. Then we went to bed. On Sunday, George and Wynne came over in the morning to organise a work party. Wynne and I worked in the kitchen. I was cooking a cheese casserole. Wynne told me of the effect that Mrs. Rolls' death had on her. I related some of the things Dr. Rolls had said to me the previous night to both George and Wynne, which neither of them had heard before. While I was working in the kitchen, I heard Dr. Rolls telling George how it was possible to receive guidance and help from people who had died, and how he felt it was important to get this idea around senior people at Collet. Elizabeth came to type letters for Dr. Rolls. I took them both coffee. People arrived for the work party. Bridget, Martin, the Newballs, Robbie, Tinky Brass, the Ferns, and Cliff Bullow. Elizabeth, Dr. Rolls, and I had lunch. This looks like a lucky dip, he said, when he started dishing out the cheese casserole. I'd marry him, said Elizabeth. All the others had a picnic down the garden in the sun by the river. I photographed them, as Dr. Rolls thought it a good idea. I designed in the library, while the others worked in the garden. Dr. Rolls kept looking out of the windows. George remarked, he also knows what they're thinking. Dr. Rolls gave a talk in the drawing room during the afternoon and played the hymn Canticle to the Sun. We all had tea in the garden, then they went home. I gave Dr. Rolls his tea, meditated, and then cooked supper. After supper we lit our pipes and talked about art, on the bringing together of head, hand, and heart, and on impregnating one's art with sattva by working when in a sattvic state, so that it is experienced by the beholder. He continued talking about how to make system diagrams into art. Some people have tried unsuccessfully to make the tarot into painting. The Persians do it in rugs, and the Tibetans manage to make their diagrams into art. I said, that painting in the hall reminds me of a gap between desires. Dr. Rolls said, yes, that's what it's meant to be. John Hersey painted it. I did him a great disservice by buying it. I think he could have made his reputation on it. Dr. Rolls continued, have you had any crossroads in your life, missed any chances of marriage, for example? I replied, no. There's always been someone to guide me, such as what art course to do. And also I got the meditation at an early age. Before that, there were no crossroads, as one's parents decide what school one goes to, for instance. Dr. Rolls said, you've got a good parabda. You're saving yourself up for someone very special. You mustn't let down all those people at Collet who you respect. I asked some questions about recurrence and Mr. Uspensky. Will he be meeting something different now in the life he's living as a result of Dr. Rolls's connection with the Shankaracharya? Dr. Rolls answered, at death, regular people at Collet, such as yourself, will have a choice whether to recur or not. Next time as a society, we should be able to make a bigger splash, but it all depends on how we do now. I missed the chance of writing a book, which would have made me quite a noise. I want to write Waking Up Differently next time. Anne Brunson's daughter said to me, I can't go along with anyone who likes a Beatle. The Shankaracharya may not be necessary next time, as the connection with the realized man is for always. We could have launched the new paradigm 30 years ago, and unfortunately we're the only people who hold all the cards. I hope next time there will be less wrong marriages. The SES Collet split many marriages down the middle at Collet. In some cases the husband is in one society and the wife in the other. I asked about, supposing my father didn't die early next time, How would I find Collett? Dr. Rolls said, if a connection has been made this time, and the circumstances are different next time, Collett will find you. We then talked quite late into the night about various episodes from our lives and school days. Dr. Rolls said, I'm not looking forward to going through boarding school again. We both disliked school chapel. I told him how in our chapel during prayers, boys used to disappear under the pews and come up in different rows. Dr. Rolls said that he had always been a rebel and was glad that he had been. He was such a rebel that he had been made head boy. He asked if I had been made head boy. I mentioned that there had been occasions when I would rather have behaved better to some people, particularly older people in authority, in the same sort of way that Lord Allen did, as described in his autobiographical fragment in The Bridge. Dr. Rolls said, do you feel you have any unpaid debts to these people? At the end of the conversation, we both decided that we would much rather be rebels than very well-behaved people. It was now late at night, and Dr. Rolls thanked me for the conversation, and we went to bed. On Monday the 24th, Dr. Rolls was rather late up. When I took him his toast, I said to him, that's what comes of going to bed so late. During the afternoon, Robbie came over to see him. He was rather unhappy at the time. Dr. Rolls waited by the front door for him to arrive. I worked in the library while they talked in the drawing room. A while later, Robbie came out in quite a different state. We went down the garden to the river. Robbie kept saying, what an amazing man. Later I prepared supper. Ian arrived back from Northumberland, and George turned up to collect me. I spent a weekend with Dr. Rolls at the end of May 1982. It was the bank holiday and also the time for Falklands conflict and the Pope's visit to England. I arrived at Waterton at midday on the Sunday. Ian showed me to my room, which was opposite Dr. Rolls's, and what food there was. I then said hello to Dr. Rolls, who was watching television in his dressing gown in the dining room. Ian left for Glyndebourne. As I prepared the dinner, Dr. Rolls handed a sherry through the hatch. During lunch, he talked about various subjects. He seemed to know all about Robert. I'm beginning to think there must be something in this acupuncture after all. He talked about the Falklands. It's all inspired by the Nazis, and in 6 months they would have had an atomic bomb, so it's all come just in time. Dr. Rolls was very impressed by Colonel H., who was killed heading his men at Goose Green. He saved the day. Do you think I'm having a good effect on the Spira family? It would be good if Rupert could do some painting. I think it's what he needs. It's amazing how individual they all are. It was a very sunny afternoon, so I drew 3 pastel studies of a laburnum at the bottom of the garden. I then took Dr. Rolls his tea in the dining room, and had my own out on the lawn in the sun. Afterwards we meditated together in the sitting room. I carried on with my drawing, and prepared supper. Dr. Rolls was in the next room watching a service taken by the Pope. Marvellous snatches of music came from the service, and I felt waves of happiness pass through me, and felt I just had to turn in the kitchen, to raise my arms and did a few revolutions. We had a very nice soup and spinach that Ian had left, and the inevitable ginger beer. After supper I showed Dr. Rolls the drawings I had done in the garden, and one of my Froyle sketchbooks. He looked at the drawings in great detail, rubbing them with his finger. I wanted to say stop it, but no pastel came off. Do you use wash? Degas used wash, layer on layer, you see in his pastels. I often wanted to draw of a laburnum tree, but I never dared. I would like to buy a couple of these. My wife would have liked one of a laburnum tree. He spent a long time re-looking at each drawing. I'll decide tomorrow which ones I want. How do you turn these into money? He said. Just put a frame round them, I replied. Of course, he said. I asked him some technical questions about the movements. I felt that downstairs they did the ho-ya too softly. It wasn't warlike enough. Ho-ya, he demonstrated it, should be done quite loud to force the ho out of the top of one's head, and the ya, which comes from deep down, is done with a relaxed jaw, as that is the last part of one to relax. I said, I hear that John Hersey is teaching the movements in Northumberland. Dr. Rolls replied, well, not exactly, but he will when I'm gone. He's under the charge of the Marshes. The Marshes' son has John under his thumb. I said, John can't like that very much. He replied, oh, he does like it. The Marshes' son is the only person he does take it from. He's one of those people like Colonel H. He leads his men up front. He led a party up a dockyard crane that was twisting under its own weight and risked his own life rather than just sending his men up. I said it would be nice if there were more Collets around so more people could get this meditation, more people to initiate. Dr. Rolls replied, it would be better to expand and strengthen the centres we already have, such as Bath and Northumberland, before setting up new ones. When I die, some people will follow the turning, some the meditation, some the meetings, until someone arises who is sufficiently respected to take over. Some people will go off and set up on their own, but that will be a good thing if they do. I said, I visited the Buscombe's group at Bentley recently, which was very nice. Oh yes, that's a very strong group. Who shone there? I said, Mr. Buscombe, Lady Allen, Bill Hersey, and Billy Wilkes. He said, people are very much respecting the Wilkses nowadays. Yes, there's nothing at all frightening about them, I replied. Dr. Rolls laughed and said, yes, that's the way it should be. I said, Collet is becoming nicer all the time, and I think it's all due to the way your wife taught the movements. Yes, he said, it's amazing considering the grim atmosphere in which she learnt them. If you felt sick, you were told to get up and stop feeling sorry for yourself. I said, I find Richard Womersley has the same effect in the turning, because he doesn't tell you how bad you were, but does point out faults very nicely. One doesn't worry, and hence it goes much better. He said, yes, he's very good. It hurts having one's feathers ruffled, doesn't it? Things are coming to a head with the SES and the Home Office. They've been at loggerheads for a long time, what with all the broken marriages. I'm saying I don't know anything about it. During the course of our talk, Dr. Rolls explained how there are different things to be done in the different decades of one's life. Though rather than relate it here, I'm quoting an account of it remembered by Anne Brunston a week later, at the end of this account. I suggested a game of Scrabble. Dr. Rolls said yes, though he had only played once with his daughter-in-law since his wife's death. Though later he decided he wanted to read and talk instead. He showed me some passages from Ouspensky's Negative Emotions. We need to take what is good out of this to supplement what's in A Method of Self-Realization. Negative Emotions, pages 9, 11, and 12. I questioned him regarding his previous wish to update the psychological lectures. He said that most of Negative Emotions was extracted from the psychological lectures. I read the passages on identification and said many people do not understand the difference between identification and attention. Dr. Earle said no, many people at College do not understand the difference. He went on to describe identification in its various stages as described in the Philokalia, pages 338 and pages 34 to 36, and he described it in relation to my activity of painting, how at a certain point after sattva is accumulated by attention, it is necessary to separate oneself. He said, "Are you quiet when drawing?" I said, "Sometimes, sometimes not." He said, "If you paint directly without thought, you get what's there directly, without the mind adding anything. That's what Cézanne was aiming to do with his later watercolours." Looking at negative emotions, I said, "What are long thoughts?" He replied, "Say you were painting, and every brushstroke you made suggested a whole lot of ideas, but you then went after, so that you lost your original direction. That's how we usually are. Long thoughts involve holding the same idea for some time and not getting diverted by other ideas." I found a passage in A Method of Self-Realization which told one not to dwell on one's shortcomings, that I showed to Dr. Rolls. He then asked me a question that I can't quite remember the words of. It was something like, how would I sum up all I had learned in the work in one word? My answer included, but I felt the most important thing to me in the last few days was that I had felt I was transparent. Some words had come into my mind while walking in a busy London street while having this experience. Transparent, being flows outwards and loves all. Dr. Rolls was very pleased with the word transparent and said, "That's just what it's like." He then went quiet and later said, "I'm trying to get quiet, but all the lovely things you've said keep coming into my mind." He then went up to bed. I followed later and removed his stockings and socks. He said, "An artist shouldn't have to do this." He looked radiant and said, "Thank you for everything." After locking up the house, I went to bed feeling very happy. Being with Dr. Rolls this time was like spending time with someone one really loves. One just wouldn't want to be anywhere else. Also, his approach was quite different. In the past, he would often be quite rude to one in order to provoke a reaction before explaining something special. For instance, once when telling me about Katie Clemson's prints, he said, "But of course you're too lazy to do that." But this time was like being with one's best friend. In bed, I read from the last chapter of Last Remembrances of a Magician that deals with Mr. Ouspensky's death. It felt, in that frame of mind, just the right thing to be reading. After Ouspensky's death, Mademoiselle C. saw the figure 7 written in light on a tree in Lyne Place. Some time later after Ouspensky's death, Dr. Nichol suddenly said in conversation to someone, "I spoke to O last night. He's on the highest level." Many felt themselves to be in the presence of O's fourth body, or received some sort of communication. One lady visiting his grave at Lyne heard his voice speaking inside her. Others who had communications felt a need to express everything in terms of painting. Another knew that the influence of what was happening would go on for many hundreds of years. The following morning, I said hello to Dr. Rolls in his room, and then went out to draw in the garden under his sunshade. Wind came over while I was drawing. Ian had arrived home late the previous night. For lunch, I cooked a cheese casserole with sausages, potatoes, eggs, etc., which we all ate. During the afternoon, Dr. Rolls lay in the garden in the sun, and I carried on with a drawing just by him. He was sometimes asleep, sometimes awake. I had a lovely swim in the river, and after sitting near Dr. Rolls again to dry off, I packed my belongings. I went to say goodbye to him. He was sitting in the dining room watching the show jumping on television. "This horse is very frisky. He keeps playing up," he said. Don't forget your sketchbook. And again, thank you for everything. We shook hands and I left. The next evening, I went to Collet to see the videotape of Dr. Fenwick's interview with Dr. Rolls. It was so lovely to see him, even on the television screen. And all through it, I kept on thinking, I was with that man only yesterday, and it helped to keep alive the magic of the 2 days that had just passed. The following Monday, I was sitting in the refectory at Collet, awaiting the movements and meeting, when Peggy McLaren mentioned that Dr. Rolls had had a heart attack. It was very clear that this was the end, and that it was only a matter of days. On Friday, June 11th, 1982, I turned early in the morning with the new turners in the final practice macabre. I found it very tiring, as did several other turners. So later in the morning, I tried to sleep in the sun in a friend's garden, and during the afternoon wrote the above account of my recent weekend with Dr. Rolls. In the evening was the new turners coming out macabre. The top studio was full of people watching. The audience was the size of that of a Mevlana festival. It was a lovely macabre. One hardly noticed the lengths of the salams as one had in the morning, but one just turned for joy. During the long third salam, I was turning in the inner circle with 2 others, one of whom was Billy Wilkes, when it felt like waves of grace were coming down on one from above. One's whole body seemed to burn and could hardly contain the joy. It felt like Dr. Rolls was all around. Previously, when asked during the week by Sue Cassini how Dr. Rolls was, I said that I didn't know, but I was sure he was still alive, as we would feel quite different and would know if he had died. After the macabre, I felt to myself, now it is possible for him to have died. We had a lovely party afterwards. Then I had a lift home with Rupert. We passed Waterton at about 11:30 p.m. The following morning, Wynne phoned to say that Dr. Rolls had died peacefully at 11:30 p.m. the previous night. 1 week later, I stayed at Waterton. It was my birthday, and I thought this a good way to celebrate it. I slept in a room opposite Dr. Rolls's bedroom, which was still as it was immediately after his death, including a vase of roses at his bedside. The house still seemed full of his presence and was saturated with sattva. I spent the time listening to a concert on the radio and sorting through his paintings on the dining room table. When I awoke and left the next morning, I felt I had acquired some important knowledge which somehow, during the night and morning, had been imparted to me. I had recently thought that if I was asked what I really wanted, I would now say that I wanted to be able to love everybody unconditionally. Because the real joy is not so much feeling happy oneself, but when this immense force flows through one and outwards towards others and all creation. That is when the word transparent has so much meaning, and any fear of not existing or of losing one's individuality is not a fear at all. In fact, in a small sense, our existence is just a dirty bit of glass not letting the light pass through. When the glass is a bit cleaner, even if momentarily, one both exists and doesn't exist. One just becomes something that light can pass through. It seems so important to become this whenever one can, via the meditation, turning movements, gaps between desires, or just by attending to one's work without a barrage of random thoughts, because this thin veil that covers this immensity for so much of the time is just a veil of random thoughts and unpleasant emotions, and although sometimes very big and apparently insurmountable, it is really very small, and in relation to what one really is, barely exists at all. At the time, I saw this as a visual symbol. It was like a great light that was obscured by a bit of old fabric, yet the light was streaming through all the holes in the fabric, and it was a very flimsy and thin piece of fabric. I saw that Dr. Rolls's diagram of the Enneagram of a triangle and a circle inside, with two-way arrows coming out of the circle, was just a representation of this idea, as was the diagram of an oblong divided into 3 compartments, with arrows passing both ways. I later found so much of H.H.'s teaching to be an explanation of this one point. There follow some incidents which illustrate the things Dr. Rolls said about continued guidance after his death, and they also show the fact that there is no need to worry, because one is being looked after all the time. It is only necessary to become quiet to get the guidance. The night before the first large Monday meeting in the autumn of 1982, I had a very vivid dream. I was sitting in the top studio, waiting for the meeting, when Dr. Rolls came up onto the stage and gave the most marvelous meeting, showing us diagrams and explaining the system. Also at the end of the meeting he told me some things from his life which I thought were most unlikely. When I woke, I had a lovely meditation and remembered for the first time since his death a saying of his. When the teacher in the 4th way dies, it's as if he had never really died, because the people that carry on remain in contact with him. I later showed Helen Wright an account of this dream. She was amazed because the things he told me from his life, which I thought unlikely, were indeed true. Although 1982 was in many ways a remarkable year because of my contact with Dr. Rolls, it was also the height of a recession, and so was a very difficult year, as my various seemingly bright work prospects packed up one after the other. I had also severed my usual New York contacts at the request of Hardy Amis, as he wanted no one else in America to have any of my work. When it became clear that he wasn't getting anywhere with my work, he said, "Here's £100 as a Christmas present." I didn't feel my future prospects were very bright. The night before the final blow that year, I had a dream. I was standing on the edge of a frozen sea, where suddenly the ice broke, and I fell into the sea and shouted, "Help, I'm drowning." Then I thought to myself, no, I don't seem to be drowning after all. So I climbed out of the sea and ice and began a long crawl up a beach shrouded in mist. Eventually I came to the foot of a ladder that I began to climb till I came to a platform. Someone was waiting on this platform. I found another ladder leading off this platform, which we then both began to climb up out of the mist. Anne Brunston told me some time later that she had also had this dream when she was with Maurice Nicoll. The next day I was preparing to take my meeting at Collet when Lady Allen came up to me and said, "We want to know what's going to happen next." I went to see her that weekend and was surprised to discover that Dick Guyot had approached Dr. Rolls wanting to know what to do next, but he would not tell him, but said he had told me. I, of course, had little to relate, which was good, because the essence of it is becoming quiet and seeing what is right for the moment, rather than following a rigid set of instructions that would become out of date as the climate of life changed. For I felt his words I want Collett to be a cell of self-knowledge, no longer the image of an esoteric school. Very important. Later in 1983, I spent several weekends with Lady Allen and prepared what became known as the Research Project. We arranged a weekend meeting and invited the Buscombes, Helen Wright, Wendy Rolls, Roy and Heather Jacob, and Dr. Witchells. I read them the essence of Dr. Rolls's instructions and proposed that we started doing research as a start towards rewriting the psychological lectures, the source material being Shankaracharya's record, Dr. Rolls's books, his papers back to 1972, and Mr. Ouspensky's Tertium Organum and a new model of the universe. This started several smaller groups gathering together material on various subjects. For myself, it resulted in a series of papers I did with Dr. Fenwick. During this time, I had doubts as to why I was doing this when there were so many older people around. So I asked for a dream to give me confirmation. Was this all just imagination, and was I wasting my own and everybody else's time, or did I have to do this? However, no dream came, but about a week later, Anne Brunson said, "I must talk to you, in passing." So I phoned her up, and she said, "I've had a dream that you're doing something that I must give you complete support for." In January 1984, while Lady Allen was in India, I had a dream that she came into my sunroom very tired, telling me that she hadn't been able to see H.H. I took her hand and told her it didn't matter, because we had all the knowledge we needed, and with the research project, we would really be discovering what was in H.H.'s teaching, rather than just amassing lots of knowledge, like some other organizations. With this, Lady Allen was very happy and went to sleep. Within a week of his dream, Lady Allen returned from India with a message from Shankaracharya, whom she hadn't been able to see. The message said that we must do over all the questions and answers from previous audiences before he would see us. Later, when he did see us, early in 1985, he suggested we prepare an introductory booklet, in fact what Dr. Rolls had asked for. I asked Ian Haxton for any details of what Dr. Rolls had said about the future. He very simply wrote out on an envelope the orange books he wanted prepared. They were Purushan Prakriti, the Law of Seven and the Law of Three, the Antikarana and Parts, Cosmoses, and the Two Hemispheres. He also mentioned that Dr. Rolls had ordered 2 books from Watkins that had not arrived until after his death. They were the Nag Hammadi Library and the Gospel of the Essenes. An important point that Ian had mentioned earlier was after Mrs. Rolls's death, Dr. Rolls thought he was going to follow fairly soon, and he asked Ian to burn many of his papers. Among those he wanted burnt were those written by Colin Lucas, as he was worried they might be regarded as a reconstruction of the system, when in fact they were not right. This is an important thing to remember for the future, as many copies have survived and are being circulated at the present date. The following is extracted from a letter written on the 14th of November 1983 by Muriel Gold, who helped look after Dr. Rolls and lived with him at Waterton at the end of his life. He was really through with the school at the end, just like Mr. O was. He'd come right through hierarchies, rules, and words. All he was interested in was the living link from the individual to the universal, and he would have defied the whole world if necessary to forge and maintain that link. The function of a school, he said, was to provide rest on all 3 levels. I understood that if one is provided with that rest, one learns, one can't help it, that in that rest we have the deep rest in the meditation, But equally important is that deep rest in the day, resting in the universal from one's expectations, beliefs, attitudes, and ideas. In other words, being a virgin psychologically. It's only in that nakedness, virginity, stillness, call it what you will, that the seed, the Christ principle, can be conceived and grow. He said he didn't know what form the next stage of the work would take, that someone might come from within us, or someone might come from outside, or that Colet House, or the study society as we know it, might have played its role and might disperse altogether. But that meanwhile H.H.'s teachings would be available at Colet for anyone who wanted them, and that now we must forge our own inner connection and not just hang on somebody else's words. We must also operate as lights within our circle of daily life. He said when someone really experiences reality, they would say it in their own words from their living experience. Nothing of the past must be hung on to. I think, he said, words, even of a holy man, are mere information, if not lived and experienced. He saw more and more towards the end the absolute non-existence of hierarchy and the irrelevance of judgment. The judging attitude of some of the so-called senior members at Colet really caused him great pain. I heard him groaning once, and when I asked him what had been wrong to make him groan so, he said something like, because of the unnecessary pain someone was giving themselves by the fundamentally misguided and niggardly judging attitudes they would hang on to. Life, he said, is just all the wonderful dance of Purush and Prakriti, the creator and created, the active and the passive. He saw it everywhere and was entertained by it. As it were, God admiring his own handiwork, Atman admiring Paramatman. This is what a school must teach us, and only a man who knows it from his own first-hand knowledge can teach it. He said there has to be a school within a school. He said the art of poetry and painting and love must flow from within and must be discovered and experienced before, and with as little do's and don'ts and forms and rules imposed from without as possible. He used to say, how can one learn about loving if one doesn't love? Rules and regulations and words don't teach one anything. I do think it's important to make all this really clear to the old hands at Colet if possible. Give them a last chance, as it were. These are people who are part of us, and especially if they are old, it must be horrid to cut oneself off and be on one's own if one is not ready for it, especially at the end of one's life. If they go, they go, but I think they should have much loving patience to try to update their ideas, to help them to simplify and cut their work, only to meet their aim, not to hang on to anything because anyone else said it would work, unless it does work now and now and now for them. I can hear Dr. Earl saying, drop it, drop it, drop it, drop everything and be innocent, dare to be a virgin and see what happens. On that last Friday afternoon, the day he died, when I was meditating, he came to me inside myself and taught me without words that everything was not only all right, but just right, and that he had to go away from us in order to come to us, and that his seeds would grow in us provided we are still, because it's only in the stillness that we can keep the inner connection. Everything depends on keeping the inner connection. It was all so mysterious and unearthly. Previously, he had told me, we are doing something really big. These things must be understood and realized and passed on. To do this, one has to dwell in the deepest stillness. One must not allow one's mind to move about, forward or backward, or to pass comment, but remain poised, still, if one is to find and maintain this inner connection. Many times he told me various versions of the three men who looked over the wall, and how we're doing everything all upside down and opposite to how it should be. Somehow he would show me the display of creation as a sex act, all dressed up in all its stages of attraction, union, conception, birth, maintenance, decay, and return. Often he would repeat, "It's all Purushan Prakriti, the one who does and the one who is done to. God, creator and creation, man and woman, positive and negative, dominant and non-dominant, inner and outer, on all levels of everything." A note written after one of Dr. Rolls' meetings. "We no longer want the image of a school, no secrecy, but a body of people that provide help, especially to young people for whom life is very difficult today." Letter to Lupita, fragment from Meriel Gold, 14th of June, 1982. As I told you, Dr. Rolls asked me to be a sort of housekeeper for him as soon as I got back from Mexico, and this ended with me being with him when he had his heart attack last Monday, through the following week, till he finally went on the next stage of his journey on Friday night. Slowly I will tell you about those mysterious and precious days with him. But for this letter, I would like to tell you how he died, as it was a real example of all he had been telling us. On Monday morning, we were sitting having a cup of coffee together. He was telling me about the working party that had been to work in the garden at Waterton the day before, Sunday. I wasn't there, as I always went home for the family at weekends, but had only got back to him later that evening. After lunch, everyone had gathered in his drawing room and had asked questions and listened to music with him. I asked him if he had really managed to communicate to them the inner work he has been doing so devotedly. He paused a moment before answering, and then said, "There is really only one thing to remember, and that is that we must love the Paramatman all the time, all the time, all the time. It's his show." He followed on by saying, "The Paramatman gave us a wonderful display of his might, with a really spectacular thunderstorm, so loud we were silenced. Then the Paramatman really showed he is the provider, the sustainer, the withdrawer." Dr. Rolls had barely finished the sentence when he was struck as by lightning and had a heart attack. Following it, he was fairly sick for a while, but in spite of his being in a state of shock and being very debilitated physically, he repeated the mantra. Even while the body vomited, one could easily distinguish the word and rhythm of the mantra. After this, he was really deeply unconscious for about 24 hours. During the following 2 days, he regained consciousness many times, looking at one with such a sweetness that was really unearthly, and smiling a smile of such quiet radiance. Throughout those days, I think the most moving thing of all was that one saw that he rested in God, keeping his hands, as he often did, in the hand gesture of remembrance. And when the body was particularly distressed, as it often was through lack of air or sometimes no air at all, he would have his eyes open and looking upwards, really leaving his body for us to care for as best we could. He never resisted or panicked or even moved. He was resolutely everywhere, holding the great hand. Once he whispered to me with a wonderful smile, "I'm all right." The last thing he said to me was, "It's very good." I thanked him many times on behalf of us all, and told him we would really try to live everything he taught us in thanks to him. He smiled faintly this time, with his eyes shut, and then sank into a deep sleep. At last he just faded, as night fades into day, slowly, silently, utterly peacefully. In myself I felt a flood of joy. This great spirit was free at last. With him also that week were Ian, his other most devoted housekeeper, his son, daughter-in-law, and granddaughter, Helen Wright, Maureen Allen, and one or two other close friends, taking it in turns to care for him. There is one thing I would like to tell you while it is fresh in me. Ian and I had been with Dr. Rolls most of Thursday night, and on Friday morning I went to my room to try to get some sleep. Perhaps not surprisingly, I couldn't sleep, so I meditated all afternoon. I don't know how long I had been there when I became aware of being taught by Dr. Rolls. His very warm presence came into me, loving and comforting. There were no words, but I understood from his comfort, from him, that everything was not only right, but just right. That he had to go away from us in order to be with us, and that he is with us always. It sounds pretty banal in words, but it was very mysterious and very certain. By certain, I mean confidence-giving. I knew what I was learning from him was true. Well, Lupita, and all of you, I send you my very fondest love, especially at this time when the flower of our school has withered, having scattered his seed in our hearts. May we stay close and help each other to bring those seeds to fruition. From the last Sunday meeting, as remembered by Anne Brunston. We do everything the wrong way round, back to front, inside out. Our senses face the wrong way. Day and night are the wrong way about. We can begin to awake at night. He often used to say towards the end of his life that he'd been in samadhi in the night. The idea is not complicated. A simple reversal of thinking is necessary. For example, we think we are being carried inexorably towards our death, but in reality we are being lovingly carried towards our birth. We are being made new, not old. Mevlana celebrates his birthday. That's why we can have confidence and let the old drop off, like old clothes, old suffering, old sins that we are attached to. Do what we do well, learn to use our gifts, develop what we love, have confidence. The conversation went on about decades. Keep a thread of stillness going, and do full-heartedly what is necessary in your life. Realize which decade you are in, and what is right and natural for that decade. If you have to be very busy, earning a living, looking after your family, paying the mortgage, it doesn't matter, as long as you keep a thread of stillness going through your life, because then, in a different decade, things will change. The reversal of thought will happen naturally in its right time. The remembrance of Paramatman and coming to the stillness is the key. Nothing else is necessary. I put this account together in 1985, and I'm making this reading in April 1995.